Hi everyone, welcome back. Alright, I guess we can start. Let me see how many people have joined. Very few so far, so okay, let's give them some time. Okay, alright, shall we start? Okay, I'm unable to see the chat for now, but I'm assuming you guys have joined. Okay, all right. Let's start. So, in previous two lectures, we looked at the assumptions, as you might remember, right? And assumption by far are one of the most important topics when it comes to CSAT, because almost every other passage has the assumption question asked in it. So that when it comes to English comprehension, assumption is the most important topic. So similarly, when we looked at quantitative aptitude, we said a number system is the most important topic because highest number of questions are asked from that. Similarly, when it comes to English comprehension, assumptions are those kind of questions. So that we have looked in the previous two lectures. So in next two lectures, we are going to look at the other two topics that are typically asked, and that is basically the end of reading comprehension or English, right? So in this lecture, we'll look at main idea. So you might come across questions like which of the following is the crux of the passage, or a critical message conveyed by the author, or what is the conclusion of the passage. All of these are nothing but the main idea question, where we are basically trying to say that what is it that one thing that author wanted to convey, what is it that one thing that compelled him or her to write that piece of paragraph, right? Nobody just writes for the sake of writing. The author wants to convey some idea, some message always, and that's typically just one message per paragraph. The rest all are the supporting details in order to convince the audience or convince the reader that whatever author is saying, the reader can then believe in him or her, right? So that's basically the idea behind why someone writes. So it's always that one idea that made them, convince them to pick up a piece of paper and start writing, right? So that basically is what main idea feels like. It's something that compels the author to write something. So what I will do is I'll quickly jump into some of the sample questions that I have, okay? And through the questions, I'll help you try and understand what main idea or how main idea question should be tackled, okay? So here is the first question. It's a very simple one. Give it a try and let me know what do you think is the main idea. All right. So most of you have got it right. So let me just explain this passage. It says, before clocks were made, people kept track of time by other means. In ancient Egypt, people used a water clock. Water dripped slowly from one clay pot into another. People measured time according to how long it took one pot to empty and the other one to fill. Candle clocks were common during the Middle Ages. As such, when a candle burned, marks on its side showed how much time had passed. A final ancient way to measure time was the sundial, which used the movement of the sun across the sky. The shadows moving across the face of the sundial showed the current time. So this is basically talking about uh, how in ancient Egypt or in ancient times, how would people measure time, right? So what's the main idea? As such, when candle burned, marks on its side showed how much time had passed. That's A. So B is saying before clocks were made, people kept track by other means. And C says in ancient Egypt, people used a water clock. Now, what is it that we want? We want the main idea. Now, main idea is something that that has to be generalized first of all, because it's the idea that author wants to convey. So it typically is the author's opinion. So any statement of fact cannot be your main idea. So if you look at C, it says in ancient Egypt people used a water clock. It's a statement of fact. So this cannot be the main idea. It's just one of the supporting details. So C is not the answer. So D is also not the answer. Now between A and B, A says as such when a candle burned, marks on its side showed how much time had passed. Even if I assume this statement is true, okay, just assume that this statement is true, it still is talking about just one part of the paragraph. That too, it's a statement of fact. Okay, there's no opinion or idea that author is trying to give, right? So B, before clocks were made, people kept track by other means. This basically is the answer. Okay, so B, Bombay is the answer in this case. Now let's move on to next question. Give it a try and let me know what do you think is the main idea of this passage. All right. So it says basketball was invented in 1891 by Physical Education Instruction Springfield in Massachusetts by the name of James Naismith. Because of the terrible weather in winter, his physical education students were indoors rather than outdoors. They really did not like the idea of boring, repetitive exercise and preferred the excitement and challenge of a game. Naismith figured out a team sport that could be played indoors on a gymnasium floor that involved a lot of running, that kept all team members involved, and that did not allow tackling and physical contact of American style football. So this is basically a short story of the origination of the football. What was the main idea of the passage? The life of James Naismith. If that was the main idea, people would, the author would talk more about the person, not the sport. The history of sports, again, it's very generalized. We are here talking about basketball only, not sports in general. C says physical education and exercise. Again, if that was the case, we would talk more about physical education and exercise. We would not specifically talk only about basketball. D says the origin of basketball. That makes absolute sense. So D is the answer in this case. Okay. Let's move on to next. Give this one a try and let me know what do you think is the answer. Alright, so it says caffeine is a natural ingredient in coffee, cocoa, tea, and chocolate, and is added to some precipitation and non-prescription drugs. Despite being natural, caffeine is also a powerful drug which greatly affects the body. In healthy, rested people, a dose of 100 milligrams, about 1 cup of coffee, increases alertness, banishes drowsiness, quickens reaction time. It enhances intellectual and muscular effort, and increases heart and respiratory rates. Drinking 1 or 2 cups of coffee an hour before exercise encourages the body to preserve glycogen and burn fat, something that results in greater endurance. In addition, caffeine masks fatigue. In doses above 300 milligrams, caffeine can produce sleeplessness, nervousness, irritability, headaches, palpitations, and muscle twitches. Caffeine is also habit forming, and those who try to suddenly stop after heavy use may experience such withdrawal symptoms as headaches, lethargy, irritability, difficulty in concentrating. So here we are discussing in healthy people what happens when someone consumes 100 milligrams of coffee, and then what happens when someone has an overdose of it, let's say 300 milligrams of coffee. Okay, so this is what's that is being discussed. So A says caffeine is powerful drug that affects the body in numerous ways, so this seems okay, let's keep it aside. B says caffeine is good to drink before working out. Again, that's just the half the passage. The other half also talks about what happens due to the overdose. That is something which is missing. A main idea has to have the whole paragraph, the essence of the whole paragraph. So B doesn't make sense. C, caffeine is linked to various health concerns. Now this talks about the second part of the passage. This is more about what are the side effects or what happens when you take the overdose of it. So B and C typically are talking about one sub idea of the passage, not the main idea. And D is caffeine is a strong drug that only enhances the body when used. No, enhances means improves. So author is not saying that it only improves. It can also deteriorate your health. So D also doesn't make sense. A is the correct answer, which almost many of you have marked. All right, let's move on to next. How about this one? Give it a try. Alright, let's look at it. Though fun to watch, chimpanzees should not be kept as pets. They are dangerously stronger than any NFL lineman. Adult chimps weigh only 100 to 160 pounds but have been measured pulling 6 to 9 times their weight with one hand. Thus, to match the strength of an average chimp, a human being would have to be able to register a two-handed pull of about a ton. It takes a very strong man to pull a quarter of that. Combined this strength is the fact that a chimp is capable of losing its temper for reasons known only to chimp. Chimps signal their feelings with subtle cues of behavior that aren't apparent to most humans. It is quite possible for a chimp to be on the verge of violence while its owner sits unaware or even unknowingly continues to provoke. Furthermore, it's not wise to keep a cute young chimp and release it into the wild when it becomes dangerous. Wild raised chimps will routinely gang up on and kill those raised in captivity. So basically, what this passage is trying is this is giving a word of caution that although chimpanzees look cute, great, they are actually very strong and they also have a temper, which means that if they attack someone, the force that they can generate is much higher than a human can endeavor. So technically, you might get killed if you were to fight a chimpanzee who is angry and using all his or her might in the fight, right? Also, what this passage is saying that if you are raising a chimp, despite all of this, if you are raising a chimpanzee at home as a pet, do not let now you don't give it back to jungle or now you don't leave it into the wild because those who have raised in wild will end up killing the one who was raised as a pet. This is what it says. Wild raised chimps will routinely gang up, so they will form a gang, those who are wild raised, and kill those raised in captivity. Captivity means those who were raised as pets. Captivity means those who were uh, given a particular protection while they were raising, right? Okay, so chimpanzees are not as reliable as dogs. Again, dogs are nowhere mentioned. Okay, so and reliability, okay, but again, comparison with dogs is alien. Chimpanzees should not be kept as pets for a variety of reasons. So this seems okay. Let's move on to next and see if we have a better choice. Keeping chimpanzees as pets and then releasing them into the wild is danger to the pet chimpanzee. So this is okay, but then this only talks about the last line. This is not the main idea. The author is saying why do you want to have them as a pet? And then he says even if you have them as a pet, don't release them into the wild. So that's the second sub idea, but not the main idea. No man is as strong as chimpanzee. Or this passage is not about the comparison of a strength of a man versus a chimpanzee. Then the passage would have looked very different, but this is just one reference in the passage. So D also doesn't make sense. Answer is B, Bombay. Okay. All right. Let's move on to next. How about this one? Give it a try. All right. So this one says human beings have always polluted their environment, but in the past it was easier for them to move on and live somewhere else. They knew that given time, the environment would take care of the pollution they left behind, and they relied on out of sight, out of mind philosophy. So if it's not in front of me, it doesn't exist. That's what it means. Out of sight, out of mind. Today, an increasing human population which uses a growing amount of energy sources no longer has the luxury to ignore pollution. The human population is approximately 7 billion population, sorry. Our overall energy consumption has gone up by 100-fold from 2000 per person per day to 230,000 per person per day in modern industrial nations like the United States. The high energy consumption allows us to mass produce many useful and economically affordable organic products that pollute the atmosphere and groundwater, damage forests and lakes, causing global warming and even deplete the ozone layer. Okay, so most of you have marked B. B says due to growth in human population, humans can no longer ignore pollution. So this makes sense. Let's keep it aside. Let's look at the other thing. Pollution is difficult on the environment regardless of your location. Uh, so the passage is not more about how it's a global phenomenon. Yes, it is a global phenomenon, but passage is not about that. So although A is true, but that's not the main idea. See, pollution is destroying our environment. That's a very generic statement. This passage is more about the linkage between the population and the pollution. C doesn't make sense. D, modern nations like United States should find ways to reduce the rapid growth of their population. No. So this is a very twisted option. We need to reduce population, but not only in United States. We have to reduce it across the globe. And we need, and United States, why it has come into picture? Because it's talking about how much energy usage is happening per person. That's why US is mentioned in the passage. It has nothing to do with what US needs to do in order to reduce pollution. The suggestion that author is making is not a country specific suggestion, it's a global suggestion. So even D doesn't make sense. So B, Bombay is correct. Okay, let's try some PYQs now. Okay, how about this one? Give it a try. All right. In India, a majority of farmers are marginal and small, less educated, and possess low adaptive capabilities to climate change, perhaps because of credit and other constraints. So, one cannot expect autonomous adaptation to climate change. Even if it was possible, it would not be sufficient to offset losses from climate change. So, what the author is saying, think of it like this: climate change is happening, okay? The author is saying the farmers need to adapt to it, which basically means what? Suppose seasons are changing, okay? Maybe it's raining too much, so maybe you need to change the way you do your farming because you know the rain is going to be a lot this year. So that is adaptation. You see what's going on and you change your own way of working in order to suit that climate. So one cannot expect autonomous adaptation. Autonomous means what? On its own. You cannot say, okay, the farmers will do on their own by understanding the climate. They won't, unless there is some incentive or some awareness that is spread. But even if it was possible, that means what? Assume that all the farmers on their own understand how to adapt to climate change. Even if that happens, that imaginary scenario, it would still not be sufficient to offset losses from climate change. That means what? Even if farmers adapt on their own, it would still not be enough because the losses due to climate change would be much higher. So just mere adaptation is not enough. You will require more than that. To deal with this, adaptation to climate change is paramount, which basically means it's the most important thing, alongside a fast mitigation response. What does that mean? That the step one is you need to adapt. You need to understand how the climate is going to affect your farming. So you need to change the way you do your farming. That's number one. And you don't have to stop only there. Now that when the climate change happens and despite your efforts you are suffering losses or something bad is happening in and around your farming land, you need fast mitigation response. Now what is mitigation? Mitigation basically is reducing the effect of something. So you are facing a disaster. So how do you mitigate it? So you know there is a disaster, so nobody can avoid it, but can I at least ensure that I am least affected by it? So maybe I can arrange some resources, some tools at my disposal that I can use so that at least when I'm facing the disaster, I am well equipped. So that is what this says, that first you have to adapt to climate change, and then when climate change really affects, you should have a better response to it. Another solution is, now we have different solution. Another solution is to have a planned or policy driven adaptation. Now this basically means what? Earlier in this passage we were assuming that adaptation is autonomous, which means government is not incentivizing that you do a particular type of farming. Here the solution that author is saying that it is policy driven, which means what? Government comes and says, you know, climate change is going to happen. Rather than doing this type of farming, you do that type of farming, so that you would be better able to manage the climate change. Now why would a farmer shift? Now farmer has been doing a particular practice of farming for tens of years at least. Why all of a sudden would farmer change? So you need to have a policy driven, which means either give them some incentive, give them some subsidies, give them some credit, right, for them to change, which would require the government to come up with policy recommendations. Perception is a necessary prerequisite for adaptation. Now the third idea that author is talking about, perception. What is perception? I need to first accept that there is a climate change. So how do I perceive climate change? Do I perceive it as something which is imaginary and it's not going to affect me? Or do I perceive it something that yes, it's happening and I'll be affected by it, so let me do something. See, something, it's like a slow poison, so it's not hitting you directly, right? So it's not, if it's not hitting you or affecting you directly, chances are you will not have a particular prevention against it. If someone is attacking you with a knife, right, you will always become defensive, right, because that's a sudden attack. But if I give you a slow poison, right, you might have better things to do in life, you might have other priority items, so you wouldn't want to you would not take care of your health so much. So that's what it is. How do you perceive climate change? Do you see it as a threat, or do you see it as something that it's not going to affect you? Whether farmers are adapting agricultural practices to climate change depends on whether they perceive it or not. Do they really feel that it's a threat or not? However, this is not always enough for adaptation, which means what? The first step of adaptation is perceive. At least know that there is a problem. At least know that there is something called as climate change, it's going to affect you. Then the adaptation, and in that's not enough. It is important how one perceives the risk associated with climate change. What is it that might happen if I don't adapt? What are the problems that climate change can cause? Right? What are the disasters that I might face if I don't adapt, or if I am not even aware of what climate change is? Right? So basically, there are three sub ideas and one fairly main idea. Sub idea is what? Uh, the first part of the paragraph basically says that assume that they adapt on their own, assuming that they have autonomous adaptation, right? It would still be have a fast mitigation response. That means author believes mitigation is possible. So D can be eliminated. C is the right answer. Again, if you remember in the first lecture, I told you when it comes to reading comprehension, focus on eliminating the option. Do not go and try and identify the right answer. You read an option, find out if there is any fault in it, eliminate it. Now A, B, D had a clear fault in it. C, I cannot see a very obvious fault in it. So I'll mark C as the answer, which anyway most of you did. Okay, so that's correct. How about this one? Give it a try. All right, let me say the emissions human put into the atmosphere now will affect climate in the middle of the country, in the middle of the century and onwards. Technological change, meanwhile, could make a future transition away from fossil fuels cheap, or it might not, leaving the world with a terrible choice between sharply reducing emissions at huge cost or suffering through the effects of unabated warming. Businesses that do not hedge against the threat of uncertain outcomes fail. The world cannot afford such recklessness on climate change. Which of the following statements best reflects the crucial message conveyed by the author? Okay, most of you have marked C. Let's look at A, B, C, and D all. A says businesses that cause emissions may need to close down or pay for pollution in future. Again, not relevant, not discussed. The only solution is technological. Only, right? Again, remember extreme, BA any framework. Narrow, oh sorry, extreme words, right? Only, always, never, highest, lowest. The only solution is technological and no other solution is there. No, author is not saying that. Author is saying there is a technological solution available. Doesn't mean that's the only solution. Waiting to deal with carbon emissions until technology improves is not a wise strategy. So that is okay. Author is basically saying that unless you hedge against the threat of uncertain outcomes fail. Now what is hedge? Basically making yourself risk averse. You know something might fail in future. Why don't you buy insurance today? That's basically hedging. Okay, so C. Since future technology change is uncertain, new industry should be based on renewable energy sources. That seems more like a suggestion than a critical message conveyed by the author. Okay, so C makes absolute sense. How about this one? Give it a try. All right, let's look at it. So it says many people are not eating the right food. For some, it is simply a decision to stick the food they enjoy, but which is not too healthy. This is leading to an increase in non-communicable diseases. This in turn leads to major burden on our healthcare systems that have the potential to derail the economic progress, which is essential for the poor to improve their lives. For others, it is about limited access to nutritious food or a lack of affordability, leading to monotonous diets that do not provide the daily nutrients for them to develop fully. Part of the reason nutrition is under threat worldwide is that our food systems are not properly responding to nutritional needs. Somewhere along that long road from farm to fork, there are serious detours that taking place. So it's a fairly easy to read kind of a passage. Okay, it's talking about the diet and so the last line summarizes is the detours that are taken. What is detours? Basically deviating from the path. So from farm to fork. Farm to fork means what? Farm means the raw crops or the raw vegetables. To fork. Fork means literally in your plate. So from where and how it's grown to how it's served you for your eating or for you as a meal finally. In between, a lot of detours take place. That means the same food item might go places, go through some processing which you might not even be aware of. And detours means it's not necessary, it's deviating from the path. So which one of the following statement best reflects the crux of the passage? The scheme of universal basic income should be implemented worldwide as a way of poverty alleviation. Again, not related to the passage. We must place food-based nutrition at center of our policy debate. So that is okay. We can keep it aside. Food-based nutrition. That's absolutely correct. C. Nutritional status of food should be improved by creating appropriate genetically modified crops. Again, not an idea that's discussed in the passage. So we can ignore it. So A and C can be ignored. D. Using modern food processing technologies, we must fortify food items with required nutrient elements. Now, some of you have marked B, which by the way is the correct answer, but you might incline towards marking D as well. And I'll tell you D is not the right answer because although it's correct, B, Bombay is an answer which is more uh, generic, which captures the whole paragraph. D becomes a little more specific when it comes to food processing part. Okay, so although it kind of captures the essence of the passage, no doubt about it, but it tends to become a little more specific. Okay, think of it like B. We must place food-based nutrition at the center of the policy debate. If you do that, right, food processing will automatically become a topic of discussion during policy debates, right? So D kind of will get ensured happens if you go with B Bombay. So that's why I would still mark B, and that's exactly what UPSC has also suggested, that B Bombay is the right answer. Okay, I am still focusing sometime on D because even I got confused when I had read this question at first. But yeah, B makes more sense than D. All right, let's try one last question. Give this one a try. All right, let's look at it. It says benefits of good quality school education accrue only when students complete and leave school after having acquired the gateway skills. Okay, like one learns to walk before running, similarly one picks up advanced skills only after picking the basic foundational skills. The advent of the knowledge economy poses new challenges, and one of the severe consequences of having an uneducated workforce will be our inability to keep pace with the global economy. Without a strong learning foundation at the primary level, there can be no improvement in higher education or skill development. Okay, so basically author is trying to say that we need to focus more on our primary education or our school education, because that forms the foundation for the higher education in the future. All right, let's look at which one of the following statement best reflects the crux of the passage. A says to become a global power, India needs to invest in universal quality education. Okay, let's keep it aside. B, India is unable to become a global power because it is not focusing or promoting knowledge economy. So B is a little more, see, the whole passage is a little more optimistic passage, or rather it's giving you a solution to a problem. B says India is unable to become a global power, which means what? This is the only thing that is not happening, or that is dragging us to become a global power, or that's holding us to become global power. Now that's not true. Author is not saying that we do all of this and we will become global power. No, it is one of the reasons why we are not becoming. B basically says that everything else is working fantastically well. Only if we improve education will be global power. No, that is not the case. B is not the answer. C, our education system should focus more on imparting skills during higher education. Again, C is a distortion. We are more concerned about the primary education. Okay, but some of you have still marked C. Okay, not many of you. Okay, C can be eliminated. D, parents of many school children are illiterate and are unaware. Okay, parents are not discussed. So A is the right answer here. Okay. All right. So yeah, that basically is the main idea, crux of the passage, critical message conveyed by the author kind of questions. Okay. I have uploaded PYQs and some practice videos on YouTube. I will ensure that those links will be shared with you. What I want you to do is I want you to practice it, 1 or 2 questions every day. Won't take more than 5 minutes. Okay. So here is what I want you to do. You play the video. Oh, sorry, you pause the video. Okay, the links that I will share with you. Open the video. You will see the question on the screen. Pause the video. You solve it. Okay, and then play the video and see how I have solved it. Now that way you will understand what is it that I think when I read the same passage as you read. How did I eliminate options, or how did I come up with the right answer? You know, all those things you will be able to understand through those videos. Okay, apart from that, we are also planning to do some practice sessions along with other batches. So I'll share all those details also, where we will just come on the call and solve questions like these. Okay, having said that, let's stop here for today. The one key thing, or the only thing that's remaining in English comprehension, is the inference now. About some 7-8 questions are asked, not 7-8, even 3-4-5 questions maybe are asked about inferences in CSAT. So in the next lecture we will now look at the inference. With that, I guess I have solved all the doubts in the chat as well. So let me stop this here. Thank you so much everyone for your time. I hope you learned something, enjoyed this session. Okay, and see you in the next video. Thank you.